think the portfolio pathway is just the right thing for you but don't know where to start? Then you've come to the right place. Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Tanashri and our guest today is Mr. Nikhil Nanjappa, who is lead consultant surgeon at Institute of Digestive Surgery, Avant BKG Hospitals, Mysore, India. After doing his MBBS and MS in India, he moved to the UK as an RCS International Training Fellow in colorectal surgery, after which he did his FRCS and completed his CESR in general surgery in April 2023. He worked as a locum consultant at St. James's University Hospital in Leeds, UK. He has established a CESR support group and has mentored over 30 candidates in the last year. It is my absolute pleasure to have you here today, Mr. Nanjappa, and thank you so much for giving us your valuable time to talk about the CESR or the portfolio pathway, as they now call it.
Thank you, Tanshri. That's very kind of you for having me on your YouTube show, YouTube channel rather. I'll try and do what I can in order to help a few people with the CESR general surgery or portfolio pathway, as we call it now. And I'll let you lead.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Nanjappa. It would be lovely to hear you shed some light on the portfolio pathway. I believe you have an introduction ready for us.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm just going to have my screen shared.
Sure.
Yeah. So this is a slide that I typically, lead with for all of my CESR classes and workshops. Although CESR has changed structurally from when it was Article 14 to now when it is portfolio pathway, the basic tenets have always remained the same. And that there's no skirting around that. You may have a few small changes here and there, but the basic premise remains the same, that you have to essentially prove equivalence to a UK CCT. That is the essential premise of Article 14 of CESR, or what is now portfolio pathway. With the portfolio pathway changes, there have been some constitutional changes that have been made to allow for this to happen, because GMC did not have the liberty to previously make changes all by themselves. It needed some legislative processes as well, and those legislative processes have happened over the last couple of years, which have led to the portfolio pathway as it exists as of today. So this is a slide that I put up typically for all candidates. This is the email that you get from GMC once you've got your CESR. After you've been through probably what is the most grueling exercise, because exams are exams. You study and then you move on. But this tests you. It tests your character, it tests your patience, and it's a very underwhelming email. And I will go through this when I talk about it, because this email is a stock email that they send you, and the only thing they tell you when you've not cleared it, because when my first application was rejected for silly reason, which I'll talk about, and then that email looked exactly like this at first glance. So you can't even tell whether whether you actually done it or not. So I put this up, and so that people have something to aspire for and know what to look forward to. It's a very bland process.
Yeah,
GMC
I was just going to say that.
Yes, it is. It's a very bland process. You can't leave anything to imagination. This was my folder. I've got a screenshot on my computer, so I've from my desktop. So I put this here because you're going to have to kind of have some organizational code and do it religiously, or be OCD about it.
Yeah.
If you want to be successful. And I think this is just the top layer of the folders. There's probably 10 subfolders in each. Okay, this is just the screenshot. And if you don't organize evidence like this, it is very difficult to get it right the first time. You will still probably not get it right the first time, but this helps. So what is portfolio pathway or CESR? Like I said already, it's essentially an option for those who haven't completed a GMC approved pathway of training to show that they've got the knowledge, the skills, and the experience that's equivalent to a curriculum in that specialty. Once you open your application, you've got 12 months to submit it. You'll need to prepare evidence in advance of when you start applying for it. Gathering evidence for the portfolio pathway is a large undertaking. It takes a really long time once you've planned it as well. Once your application is submitted, it can take over 6 to 9 months to process. At least that was the time frame when I applied. I don't have reason to believe that it's changed significantly since. It's probably improved by a month or two. The question that I often get asked about CESR is about the recency of evidence, because you have to remember there's a whole wide spectrum of people from around the world who are applying for this. Some have been career surgeons for 15, 20 years. Some probably retired as heads of departments in various countries as well who want to consider the CESR application. And then that is where recency of evidence matters. It doesn't matter if you've retired as a head of department at a university in your hospital, because that is not what the GMC wants. GMC wants to show that you are currently competent, and which is why they will only consider evidence for the last 5 to 6 years, depending on your specialty. And this has now changed. And I think with the portfolio pathway, there is now an emphasis to even show that you have to have more recent evidence. For example, when you're talking about your work-based assessments, you cannot actually just use evidence from about 5 or 6 years ago. That needs to be more recent as well. So there's been that change because they are, in the words of the GMC and the JCST, they're essentially trying to prove that you are a safe surgeon. So you have to be recently competent.
So when you say recent, is this in the last 1 year or?
No. So when they say recency of evidence, so for all surgical specialties, general surgical specialties, it is 6 years. Now, presumably for medical specialties and some other specialties like urology, like you said, if your CCT is for a 5-year period as well, this is probably cross-representative in that as well. So it will be for a 5-year period. Although that being said, they don't really draw the line in the sand and say it has to be 4 years, 11 months, and 30 days, or if it's 5 years and 1 day, they won't accept it. I think everybody will be a bit reasonable about it. Because even if you've, for example, when I submitted my CESR application in January 2023, I had given them 2022, I had given them evidence all the way from Jan 2016. And that was from 6 years. It took the GMC 4 months to even open my application. So my evidence is already out of date. So that's on them. That's your date of submission you can't change. So there are certain things that you can't change, but roughly remains recent. So you can't use papers that are 10 years old, 15 years old. They will not count for anything. Obviously, if you've got a qualification or a degree or a PhD from some time ago, that's not something people can take away from you. So that is something that you can use, but it's the recency of the evidence that counts. This is a slide that says this is the common content that's shared for all surgical specialties. Essentially, your generic requirements are research, quality improvement, medical education, management leadership. And there are some changes in the assessment rules, primarily about MCR. Now, as a trainee, you are probably used to doing this anyway. I'm not entirely sure if urology does it. Presumably, urology does it as well.
We use it as well.
Correct. So this became the central tenet of the CESR when the November 2021 change happened. So it went back. I mean, essentially, these things move in phases. So in Article 14, you could actually get a favorable result in your Article 14 if your boss and somebody who's signing off for you had the gravitas to call up the college and say, that's my candidate. You kind of have to get them a good result. That could still happen. So I've heard anecdotal evidence of this, but that changed with competency-based assessments, where you essentially only had to meet checkboxes, and your formative assessment or summative assessment didn't matter. So that took away the power from trainers themselves, so that trainees could literally show, I need to do 3 anterior sections or 3 right hemi's, and I was declared competent. But that didn't actually, wasn't a summative result. So that changed again in the 2021 pathway, where they got an MCR, and MCR became a very important part of CESR. Although with the portfolio pathway, this has now changed again for some reason. I do not know if it is because the GMC is still building their website up after the change, because that probably takes time. It's not easy to manage a website of that scale, and it's probably just IT design that's changed it. And they are now calling it structured reports, and they will potentially, this is my guess, I'm hazarding here, it is possible that GMC will now seek equivalent of an MCR directly from the consultant rather than have you submit it. So I think that is the direction of travel, but MCR as a concept remains the same. It's essentially to prove that you've got generic competencies across the 9 across the 9 GPCs and the CIPs that you need in your specialty. So the GPCs are for what GMC wants out of you, to show that you are a proper doctor, a good doctor. It doesn't matter what your skills are. You just have to be a doctor who's a good doctor, who's deemed a good doctor by GMC. And the CIPs are for the Royal College. That is for the JCST to accept that you are skilled and have the knowledge in your specialty. So the curriculum has kept changing in general surgery as well. Again, it goes in waves. There was this era where they wanted everyone to subspecialize. So they said, you don't need general surgeons. You can literally have a bunch of subspecialist surgeons and general surgery will take care of itself. And that was the move that happened, I think, late towards 2008 to 2010 onwards. During that time, what that led to was that it created a generation of subspecialist surgeons who couldn't do a gallbladder operation. Now, that is a problem because the emergency general surgery take then suffered. I have seen hospitals in England where the wait list for a gallbladder operation was over 2 years, and this was before COVID. And I think then GMC decided that you actually need general surgery as well. And then there's been this push where they've pushed towards what they are now rebranding general surgery as emergency general surgery. And they've made that an essential component of your CESR application. It is so important that you have to show that you've been part of a reasonable emergency general surgery rota in the last 5 years leading up to your submission. Otherwise, you may as well not apply. So if you are a subspecialist surgeon who's just doing transplants and you cannot show that you've been part of the emergency general surgery rota, you actually cannot apply for a CESR in emergency general surgery at all. You've got to go down a different route, a non-CCT pathway route. That is another alternative, but it's a harder route to do. Those are the two options. And I think that's the curriculum change now. And the emphasis is now more towards creating a broad-based general surgeon who also subspecializes in his last 2 years and not create subspecialist surgeons from their ST 3 years, which is what happened in a lot of places. You can apply for the portfolio pathway via 2 routes. You could either apply for a CCT pathway, so that is set in general surgery, urology, you've got all your specialties. And if you've got something that is not listed in that pro forma, you could then apply for a non-CCT specialty in the portfolio pathway. Now, this is again, it will be decided by the GMC on a case-to-case basis as to who they will set up as a group of specialists for this. And I think generally this is an option that they've kept open for when there are deficiencies in the system and they need to recruit quickly. So they will allow, for example, I know of somebody who got their CESR in pediatric neuroradiology, which is not a specialty in England, but they got their subspecialty CESR. They got their CESR in radiology without having set foot in England directly in the special register. So that can happen. I know them personally. So, and some HPV surgeons or liver transplant surgeons may have applied in this route. They can prove that they are visceral transplant surgeons or something of that sort. So once you apply, you go onto the GMC website and then you apply from there. The GMC then goes through the process where they comb through your application, and there's a specialist advisor that gets assigned to you who goes through the application and will do their best to make sure that you've got everything right in your application before they send it off to the Royal Colleges. Again, when they say the Royal College, it's the it's the SAC of the Joint Committee on Surgical Training who will sit on this, and they will give the verdict on your application. Typically, between the GMC and the JCST, there can be a bit of back and forth. And based on the recommendation of the JCST, GMC will take action and will either grant you a specialist register entry or will deny it or will ask you to apply for a review. Now, the standard that you're applying for remains the CCT curriculum. There is no deviation from that, except for the non-CCT pathways. GMC and the Royal College assessors need to be assured that you are fully competent in all of the curriculum requirements of that specialty before they grant you a CESR, or what is now portfolio pathway. Now, this is from the GMC website itself. It kind of breaks down what is the value each of these domains hold. It says knowledge, skills, and performance. So that is essentially the bulk of your application, carries 75% weight. Safety and quality carries about 20% weight. Communication, partnership, and teamwork is about 5%. Maintaining trust is about 5%. Now, each of these domains also have subdomains, and those domains get changed according to specialty and according to the year of the application as well. If you look at the CESR application, when I did it in 2022, to the CESR application that is to the portfolio pathway application that is there now, it's almost unrecognizable. So the system in which the folders are arranged and the order in which you maintain has all changed. I mean, the basic structure remains the same, but they keep moving those bits around. This is a list of tips that I give candidates who are going for CESR. Remember, it's a completely paper-based process. So when I say paper-based, it's actually online, but the point I'm trying to make is that there is no interview, there is no justification. Your paper has to represent you in totality, your application. So GMC evaluation will focus on the last few years, that is 5 or 6 years of your application. Think about the evidence that you need to gather evidence sensibly. There is no point, you cannot make up for deficiencies in one domain and cover up for it by getting more in another domain. That can't happen. That can only happen within the same domain. Now, for example, if the requirement is to say that you need to have 3 publication papers published as a significant author in a PubMed Index journal, you can have 2 and they will accept it. You can, but you can then also augment it by showing that you set up a journal club or you are part of some sort of multi-center collaborative research project, or you are PI or associate PI in any of these projects. So that way you can make up, but you cannot make up for the lack of FRCS by showing double the number of operations that you need to do. So that you can't cross compensate for lacuna that there is. Please be aware that the curriculum can change. So when I was applying for my CESR, I was going. It was the time when there were options. So I had to either choose between the old curriculum, as they called it, pre-2021 curriculum, or the new curriculum, that is 2021 curriculum. So I was given that choice. I chose to apply in the 2021 curriculum because my portfolio fit more with that. And that is why you have to have very careful reading of the pathway, and it's very boring. So your trainees would have read it, your curriculum. It is very. When I first moved to England, when I saw this curriculum, I was told by my supervisor to read the curriculum, and I didn't read it for about 4 years. I think it is so boring. It is. But if you are serious about CESR, you've got to read it at that point of time, because you've got to prepare for changes. There are people who've not got on the specialist register simply because they couldn't keep up with the curriculum changes, and what they were doing at that point of time didn't allow for it. And it's very important to make sure that you've planned it in that way. Use the tools that you have at your disposal to make your application better. Use eLogbook, use ISCP, use everything that the trainees do, because if you literally try and mimic what a trainee does for the ARCP, you will essentially have a fairly reasonable outcome with your portfolio pathway application. So this is a new change. So I've just put this slide up from the recent GMC communication. It says that you should be able to demonstrate recent competency, and they have specific guidelines. So when I applied for CESR, there was no exemptions made for those working less than full time. I think there's been a lot of lobbying and everything. So now they've started to allow that as well. But there is a caveat there where they're saying that even though you've done that, and we will let you do that, because if you're letting trainees do it, you should be letting non-trainees do it as well. But then your PBAs and CBDs have to be recent. You then cannot use 8-year-old PBAs and CBDs. So they are very particular about this. And they're also then saying that you have to show evidence of presenting at M&M meetings and governance meetings and all of that, so that you're able to deal with appropriate adverse events. So I'm not sure if you remember, there was this incident about this pediatric trainee in Leicester, which became national news, where she got back from maternity leave, and then there was this unfortunate death of a child, and she was literally thrown under the bus, and now she's been acquitted and put back on the register. She's now a consultant. So I think there is that. This probably comes out of that, where they're trying to say that, you have to ease back into the system with doing M&M meetings and everything, so that, you make sure the governance aspect of all of that is covered.
But I think it's still unfair to expect, if somebody is on leave.
Yes, Exactly. And I think there is a change towards it. There's always a lag. Because I think till now, what's happened is the Article 14 or CESR or portfolio pathway has always been like an afterthought.
Yeah.
You sort training out first and then this gets sorted. But I think that's probably begun to change already, and it will probably change as they realize that it's actually cheaper to just give out portfolio pathway certificates. Uh, and
And
then it might
but
change. Again, that's
it's
just
again a demand supply thing, I believe.
correct.
Yeah.
Yes, completely. So everything, market rules the roost. At the end of the day, it is all about the market. Uh, I know people who've got CESR without having done their radiology postgraduate exams
Yeah.
in radiology. Okay, it cannot happen in general surgery. You could have done everything right, and it will still get rejected on some flimsy ground. When we interact, I'll get you to ask me some silly reasons for CESR rejections, and I'll talk to you about it then in the Q&As. I think it's just fascinating. So what they've now changed with the MCR is what I've highlighted on this slide is that I think they're now calling it structured reports. Now, I do not know if it is because the GMC hasn't yet updated this portfolio pathway from physicians to surgeons, which is why there is this play with words that has happened. And it doesn't matter. I think I would still tell those who are aspiring to just go with your MCR and then let it be. If they need a structured report, GMC will get one.
Okay.
And that's the best way to deal with it. So application tips, make sure you've read the curriculum properly. Find that supervisor or a clinical friend who's critical for you, will help you with your application. I think it's very important. I had this trainee who I was working with in Basildon when I was a fellow. He was phenomenal. I think it potentially is the reason why I even applied for CESR. I didn't think I would apply for CESR at all. It was never a plan. And within a year of having met the guy, I applied for CESR. And as a trainee, he was very helpful, and I'm sure he'll be a very successful consultant in colorectal very soon. Remember that the JCST cannot do a pre-application assessment. They don't. They give you only generic answers. So all the information that you get out of JCST or from the GMC is very generic. None of it makes. It's not specific to you, and they're not allowed to give you any specific information as well. Even from your specialist advisor, when we interact, I'll talk more. Can't give you any specific advice. They are essentially non-medical people who look at your application. So you have to tailor the application so that it has to get past the non-medical person first. So the idea is to dumb it down as much as you can, and don't assume that they will understand all of your acronyms and short forms and all of that, because they will not. So it's very important to put everything out there. Knowledge. You'll need a UK postgraduate exam in general surgery, that is the UK FRCS. And now the criteria for that has changed as well. So you could, when I applied for my FRCS, I had my MRCS, but you could apply for an FRCS without. Yeah. It is now not possible. You need to have an MRCS and then apply for your FRCS. Even if you've got an international FRCS, there is no guarantee. I mean, I have to say this because it's not written in stone, but I've been told by very senior people in the committee in multiple workshops I've attended, and I know from experience that if you don't have a UK FRCS, you will not be given a CESR unless you are able to prove the evidence by showing that you've actually got competency in every domain that's considered in the FRCS exam by publishing a paper in each of those domains, which is again theoretically
almost impossible.
Not possible to do. Yeah, so it is. Anecdotally, I've heard that the only time an appeal has been won is somebody was able to do it. Somebody did prove that they had a publication in each of the domains, and they proved it. But that is when it went through a period of appeal. So when it's an appeal, it's barristers and lawyers that get involved. You don't do it yourself. So that's not the norm. That's not the norm. You have to make sure and check if you've got the procedures that's required in your field. You've got all the WBS that you need to do. Make sure you've got the publications, the presentations, the GCP course is mandatory. Training and teaching evidence, that's the train the trainer course, and a bit of other things. Audits, make sure you've closed the loop for these audits, and the governance in the NHS is a very important part as well. This is how your portfolio pathway is assessed. Initial assessment, mine took 3 months for the GMC to open it.
Okay.
I applied on the 22nd of January, and I think my first response was on the 24th of April. that was when the yes, we have received your application. Thank you very much. We will now spend another 4 weeks looking at it before we get back to you. So my specialist advisor only responded to me on the first Monday or sorry, I think the third Monday of every month. Maybe they were working part time, but that's probably what GMC kind of gives them a schedule to do. And that one email, I mean, if you miss that, if there is a query that comes from that, it delays the whole process by another month, for another 4 weeks. And then the GMC, so my application in January went to the specialist JCST in July, September. And JCST gave a response within about, they have to do it in 2 months. I think they gave a response within a month and they'd asked them for a query. And then the GMC will see the recommendations and then they will either accept or they will deny your application or they'll give you an out. They'll say, apply for a review and provide this evidence to make up the gap that you've got in your, The Royal College faculty specialist assessment faculty is done by 2 independent evaluators. Remember that this is a very bulky affair. So my CESR application probably had over 2,200 pages worth of documents. And you will be surprised to the extent of which the evaluators will read this. Because if you read the report that you get, and it's an unpaid job, so no, you don't get paid for it. You can probably just claim it in your SPA time. So, and they actually read it. My report that I got when my CESR application was first rejected was amazing. When I read the thoroughness of the report, they actually paid, they paid heed to every single thing that I put on the application. So they actually do it properly.
So it's actually impressive that they're doing this with so much sincerity.
Yes. So I think let me reach the end of the presentation and then we'll talk a bit more informally, I think, if that helps. And the reviews are, if you're not successful, you have 2 options. You can either review it, you can accept it and reapply, or you can action what the requirements are, or you can go for an appeal. Reviews are the best way to do it because, it's always just easier to do what you are told rather than, fight the system. So that brings me to the end of the presentation and I'll stop sharing my screen. Yes.
Thank you. That was a very in-depth presentation. And of course, I would like to know your personal experience as well.
So it'll make for interesting listening. So I applied for CESR in Jan 2022 because I had to you must remember my application was halfway through COVID. And it wasn't a planned, CESR application. So I spent a good part of a year and a half not recording any appendectomies or any INDs in Leicester when I was a fellow there. For the first few months, I didn't even know there's some e-log book or anything. I didn't know. And I thought these surgeries are beneath me. So I had gone there to become a colorectal fellow. So I didn't write them up in my logbook.
Yeah.
So there was no way in hell I would have made up the 1,600 case numbers if I couldn't use my India numbers.
Correct.
So there was a finite amount of time. So I had to submit by the 15th of January to make it 6 years. So I submitted it then, and then it went to GMC. And I organized my CESR application very well. I spent a lot of time. I spent 9 months starting May 2021 till I submitted. I applied about 2 weeks of annual leave to do my application from the 1st of January to the 22nd when I finally submitted it. This is after I had all of my evidence ready.
Yeah.
Then the GMC took it and they had no questions at all. The special advisor went through it. She asked me to reorganize a few things because simple things like don't put 1 audit slide per page, just put 6 per page to reduce your document breadth, evidence and things like that. So I actioned that. And remember, the GMC website is very dated. It's horrible. You will never know how bad it is till you've actually used it. So there is no edit function. And there is no reorder. So if you change something, if you want to change the last file, you've got to delete every file and you repopulate the entire index.
Oh, God.
So, and I don't think they are interested in making it any better as well. And it went well. There was no questions asked. And I genuinely thought I covered all bases. And October 2022, I get this letter saying, it looked exactly the same email that you saw at the start. And I'm like, I'm seeing it. I've just finished the list. I was a local consultant at Leeds. I've finished, I think, 4 or 5 lab calls. I'm looking at it. And I'm like, I think I was numb. I drove back home. I hadn't read it fully. I couldn't read the report. It just comes as a PDF attachment to that email. I went home and I read it. And okay, so your first thought is you've not passed, and then you want to understand why. And then you have your usual suspects. My first suspicion was that they didn't accept my India logbook numbers. They didn't accept my India colonoscopy numbers. These are usual suspects. So then I'm going through, which is why I said this is a very detailed report. So I am reading every single report. I'm going through domains 1 to 15. And he says, satisfied with domain 1. I have seen this point, that point, blah, blah, blah. I've seen every domain. And I'm reading it to the end. And I'm still not able to find what I've not done.
Yeah.
So finally, in the comment section, it literally says this. Dr. Nikhil Nanjappa has successfully proven his satisfied the competency requirements across the specialty of general surgery, apart from the fact that he hasn't given us primary evidence of rota management. That is it. Primary evidence, not evidence. Primary evidence. So there's a differentiation. What's primary evidence or secondary evidence? So I had given evidence that the rota coordinator had written an email saying that I managed the rota for this period of time, and this is what I did. But they wanted the actual rota itself, because apparently that's primary evidence.
Okay.
So so I had to apply for a review to submit this. But I don't blame the JCST for this, because JCST literally said, ask him to submit this document.
Yeah.
That could have been a one-way email from JCST that could have been sent to me. It wasn't. They sat on it for a month, and then after a month they will reject it, and then you reapply. So that then took another 6 months to process.
Oh my God.
One application. And then when you look back at the timeline, I think the JCST received my review application on the 4th of Feb, and they've approved it on the 5th of Feb, because that is what anyone would have done, because there was only one document that was required.
Yeah.
But the GMC sat on that for another 2 months and 20 days to send me an answer. I'd left the country by then, but that was my CESR journey, and I think everybody's had something similar itself.
So your timeline was about 15 months, was it?
Yeah, 14 months. So my timeline was 14 months. And I think I have had people for whom it's taken longer.
Okay.
I've recently spoken to somebody who sees their application took 3 years. This used to be the case. I think, yeah. So that was the time when you had to lug around boxes and go to the Manchester office of GMC and submit physical copies of your papers. Okay. So this is an upgrade, what we've currently got.
Okay. And the average time would be about a year, you would say?
Yeah, I think they have improved significantly now after I think the COVID backlog has happened. But again, now GMC getting into this whole multi-professional regulator business, it's not like they will employ new people. It's just that they will spread the current employees thin. So I think it might go back in time. So I think you have to be prepared to spend at least a year and a half, to get a successful CESR application, and I think I am yet to hear of somebody who's got the general surgery application approved with the first go. My reason is also, my review is not, there's sillier answers. People have got responses.
So what is the silliest thing that you've heard?
So another person who got in touch with me, his CESR was rejected because he hadn't retracted duplicate records from his logbook. So there's an option in e-logbook, if you go, where it says, because it's possible that you've entered the same operation twice, you don't do it intentionally, you can enter it from a laptop or the app, and you can make that mistake. So which is why the logbook provides you that option to delete duplicate records. He hadn't done it. I think and not just that, they didn't just tell him that. They said that you are deliberately lying. So you have to now do a reflection and do a governance course about why there is a question on your probity, get a report on your probity and things like that.
Oh my God.
So there was somebody whose CESR application was rejected, and they were asked they had missed redacting one line of somebody's date of birth or something that is, or something else. And they have to do a reflection and do a course and all of that in order to reapply. So these things are, GMC is very particular about this, and they will pick up on all of these things. Some people have had it because they've shown that the audits weren't actually closed loops.
Okay.
I've recently heard of somebody whose application got rejected because they said that standard that they'd used in their closed loop audit isn't a nationally or internationally accepted standard. So they can go to that extent.
Yeah. And every review must be costing something.
£800 it was when I last checked.
Oh my. Okay.
Yeah. So it's very expensive. The whole process, I think CESR, just the application cost me £2,000 to first apply and then £800 to reapply. And that's how much it costs usually. And that's where getting it right the first time, I think, helps.
Absolutely. Is there a limited number of reviews that you can ask?
No, there isn't. I think you just get bored and move on.
Yeah.
Because the GMC is happy taking £800 from you every time. I don't
Or
think
you
that
get
upsets
broke.
them at all. Or you get broke. Probably people go into debt as well, trying to get the CESR through.
So as you said, you need to get it right the first time, and that's, I think, I would say somebody like you who mentors people regularly for this is absolutely essential.
So yes, little bit of advertising here, really. So when I went through my CESR pathway, CESR process, I was making up things as I went along, trying to gather from everybody that had done it before in other specialties, because there was nothing available for general surgery. And I think general surgery being that wide specialty in which everyone from around the world applies for, you probably got the highest number of applicants in one specialty in general surgery as well.
Yeah.
And the lowest success rates, because you've probably got a whole variety of people applying for general surgery itself. So there's nothing in general surgery, to be honest, because everyone's had a very varied experience. So when I finished my application, I started to conduct these courses where I used to, small groups of about 10 people in a group, where I used to conduct this 9-hour workshop. Essentially, this was for 9-hour workshop. I used to charge £100 for the course. It was very reasonable. And people used to, at least by the end of the workshop, get 1 or 3 answers in their mind straight. That CESR is not for me. I can't do this.
Yeah.
This is what I need to do if I have to get CESR. That is the other extreme. And the middle one still thinking, okay, well, let me give it another year or two to consider. So you will end up with one of the 3 outcomes. So I did 5 batches of that last year.
Okay.
And then after which it just became a bit too hectic. So I had to cancel all of my appointments for the afternoon, because it takes a long time. Because if you're answering questions for about 10 people, remember that the presentation you saw is 1 out of 24. So there's 24 other presentations like this. So it takes time. So which is when I started to do this one-on-one mentoring. So I kind of do 3 levels, where it's the entry level, where somebody, I do a 3-hour workshop with them, essentially delivering my workshop one-on-one, and I let them split it with a friend. Okay. It's up to them. They can split the fee between each other however they wish. And that's the entry level. Then I do the next one, which is the silver, as I call it. It's this workshop plus 2 additional other 40-minute sessions on Zoom. And I then do an individual personalized assessment of their portfolio and tell them what they have to do.
Okay.
And then the topmost thing that I do is essentially I will handhold them in every part of their CESR application, like from gathering evidence, putting them into folders, having a look at it, checking if they've redacted every single thing, bundling piece of evidence together. Because if you've developed a system, this is easy. Because now, when you've done it multiple times, it's just easier to have it done. Otherwise, when you're doing it for the first time, you're making it up as you go along, and it takes very long.
Yeah. And what has been your success rate for the last applicants that you helped or mentored?
I will know next year. So
Okay.
I think going by GMC's, yes. So going by GMC's track record, we will know later this year or next year at the very least. But I mean, every application is different, but people who get there are serious about it. Most people will not come to the gold service tier that I offer unless they're serious about it. These are people who want to turn around applications in a specific time format, and I only offer it to those who I think is possible. So I do an assessment of their portfolio in a short 40-minute introduction session, and I will decide whether I can do this or not, and that gives me an assessment of their character as well.
Yeah.
To then make a judgment whether they are amenable to actually applying for CESR, or will they just fall by the wayside.
Correct. Because it's your valuable time as well. So I do understand.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time. I mean, just bundling up and making your PBA requirements just the PBS, once you've completed it, just to bundle it up and make it one piece of uploadable evidence with an index, it will take me 5 to 6 hours. And it'll take me 5 to 6 hours. I've done this 5 times.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's not easy.
I can imagine it must be very exhaustive. So you said you do it on behalf of them. Is that correct?
Not entirely. I give them an entire roadmap.
Okay.
I will, when it comes to each and every bit, I essentially give them this master folder where you have to put in each of these bits of evidence first. That is phase 1.
Yeah.
Then I start working on their CV, as in I give them a template of how a CV should be written.
Okay.
And they will then be able to do it. We go through multiple edits. I've been through, let's say, about 13 or 14 edits per CV.
Okay.
And then we finally agree on, what is a decent CV. And then like that with PBAs and with audits, you've essentially got a second person who's playing the role of that specialist advisor, really,
Yeah.
who's also medically trained. So this is what the specialist advisor is supposed to do. They're supposed to be that bridge. They're supposed to look at every single piece of evidence and tell you if you've got this right or wrong. And I think that's the role I would play. Yeah.
And I think that is a very important role considering how much it takes to submit a review.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. And I think a lot of our viewers would definitely be interested in the services that you're offering. Is there a way that they can get in touch with you?
Yeah. So I'm reachable at on my website www.drnikhilnanjappa.com. It's got an entire page on the Portfolio Pathway Support Program.
Okay.
It's got the contact page, it's got the contact details, and it's even got feedback from those who've attended my workshops before.
Okay.
To just give you some perspective.
Okay, that's brilliant. But you have given us a very good introduction, which is available on the channel for anybody to decide if they want to get into this or if this is not something that they would be keen to pursue. So thank you so much for giving us your valuable time.
Thank you, Dhanashree, and that's very kind of you for having me on your channel. And yes, if anyone wants to get in touch, please do. Best of luck for your channel. I think what you're doing is also amazing. This will, if I were a CESR pathway person, remember this counts for leadership.
Okay.
So you should put it in your portfolio. You should put it in your pathway in your portfolio.
Yeah, I will need it for my ARCPs.
Correct. So if you see every single thing, I tell those who are serious about CESR, I tell them that everything that you do should count for your CESR. If it doesn't count for CESR, don't do it. It's a waste of your time. To be honest, I think there should be a correlation or a study to check the success rates of candidates. And you see the success rate of Indian candidates in CESR, and it is significantly better than any other cohort. Okay, this is anecdotally or not. If you've I think we're fairly good at following a set pattern, and not questioning it. Coming from a very hierarchical system, you just do what you are told. Yeah. And I think we're not in the habit of fighting and asking, oh, why should the rules be different? Blah blah. You just get on with it. And I think that the only people who I know who've cleared CESR in the last 2 years, I think, in general surgery, are mostly Indians who I know.
Wow, that's quite motivating. One question that I have personally is there a way to completely do it, overseas? If you're someone who's working in India and if you've read the curriculum, then is there a way technically to do it from India?
There was. Okay. It doesn't exist anymore. Okay. I think it was there till I applied. Okay. And Portfolio Pathways kind of put an end to it. Again, it's counterintuitive. You are trying to get people to fill it up. I think they'll again take it on a case-to-case basis. Because for starters, FRCS now cannot be done without working in England. It's not possible. Okay. And without FRCS, you are going to fail your Portfolio Pathway or CESR General Surgery application. Okay, you'd have to, like I said earlier, it's very hard to prove that competence. Yeah. So without FRCS, it's hard to do it. But if you already hold an FRCS from before, you can still do it. But you have to get work-based assessments and things done in the ISCP format, which can also be done, but FRCS is key.
Correct. Yeah. So once they clear their FRCS, they're free to move anywhere else in the world and then submit the CESR application from outside.
Yes, as long as you've done it recently. I think the recency of evidence here again counts. And to be fair, people often tell you that there's misleading things that tell you, oh yeah, they won't accept logbook numbers from another country. That's not true. I am evidence that they will accept it. Yeah. Nearly 2/3 of my evidence was from India.
Correct.
in my logbook.
Yeah.
Okay, so if what I try to show is that I was doing all of the core procedures in colorectal, that is the anterior resection, the right hemis, and all of that. I had shown competence with the PBS, and had shown adequate numbers of those, but I did not have the bulk of numbers. 1,600 cases weren't there for me to show.
Yeah.
So they accepted 900 cases from India, and I had to show 700 cases I had in England. They accepted all of my colonoscopy numbers as well, and yeah.
So this would be nice for someone who's currently doing their specialization in India and then who just wants to move
Yes.
for a couple of years. They can probably start early on while they're still in India.
Correct. So if they know how to do it, and I think this makes a difference. I've had about 3 or 4 people attend my workshops for this, where they're planning. They've got a fellowship after their MCH or DMB super specialty, and they're then planning ahead, and they've attended it. And I think you can plan. You know what evidence to collect, what you need to take, and that can be done as well.
Correct. Okay. So that's nice, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
So that was the end of this video. I'll attach the link to Mr. Nanjappa's website in the description box below. Please feel free to use the comment section to ask your doubts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'll see you in my next video and take care.